Hey everybody, my name is Alex with Hake Hardware, and in this video we are going to go over how to install Grafana as a service in Ubuntu 24.04. So I want to cover a few things before we jump into it. First is there are some alternate installation methods. You can set up Grafana in Docker. So if you want to host it locally in a Docker container, which is my preferred method, you can do it via Docker. I have a guide for that. Or you could do it in the cloud. Grafana Cloud is also really good. It's hosted by Grafana. Both of these alternate methods are free, and it just kind of depends on what your use case is. One benefit for Grafana Cloud is that, let's say you have a couple different people that are, located in different places across the country. Like I have a buddy that lives in a different state than I do. Instead of trying to configure my Docker container to be accessible by him, he can just log into the Grafana Cloud instance and we can both look at the metrics that we have there, the dashboards. So it kind of just depends. And then we have OSS versus Enterprise. My understanding is feature-wise they're the same. They're both free. One, of course, is open source, and the Enterprise version can be upgraded with a license if you want to do the paid version, which I believe you get a few extra features. But if you're planning to not get a license, you might as well just go with the open source one. But if you think you might go with a license, use Enterprise. And this guide uses the open source method. You will need to reference the downloads page to get there's slightly different packages that you're going to download for the Enterprise version. And then there's two ways that we're going to cover how to install it. One is via apt. So if you've used Linux or Ubuntu, you know you can do like apt get update, and you can get updates for your packages and install those updates as new versions come out. The second version is just downloading the .deb package and installing it that way. That way won't update automatically. So just keep that in mind. If you want a little bit more control, you don't want automatic updates, you can just download the .deb and install it that way. Both methods are covered in this guide, but we are going to be using the apt method, which is the first one here, installation via CLI. You can see on the right hand side there's installation via .deb, so you can skip that part or go directly to it depending on which method you're going to use. And that's it. So we're going to jump into the terminal here and we're going to get started. And you can see I actually had to uninstall it because I already went through this once. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is get some dependencies here just to make sure we have the packages that we need. And then we're going to import the GPG key. And then we're going to add the repository. So this allows us to do that sudo apt update and get the latest packages, which we're actually going to do right now. And then we can just install Grafana. So this is super easy. Sudo apt get install Grafana, 470 megabytes. We'll get that downloaded. And then it's good to go. So we are installing this as a service, and you can see it's not starting on installation. So we need to actually configure the service, start the service, and get it running before we can use it. But before we get into that, I want to talk about ports. So by default, Grafana will run in your browser on port 3000, but that's kind of a busy port. There's a lot of other things that might use port 3000. So if you want to change which port it runs on, you can open up the configuration, which you can do sudo nano etc grafana and then grafana.ini. And this is the Grafana config. And they use semicolons here to comment out specific settings, which they're all commented out by default. I'm going to scroll down to the HTTP port use, and I'm going to uncomment that and just change it to 9999. I know that port's free. And then I'll do Control X, Y, and then enter to save that. So now when I start the service, it's going to start on port 9999. So let's go ahead and get the service started. So we'll do sudo systemctl daemon reload. So that just basically refreshes so it can see the new service. And then we will do sudo systemctl start Grafana server. So the server should be started. We can verify that with sudo systemctl status Grafana server. And we can see it is running and it's disabled. And what this means is when I reboot, it's not going to start automatically. This might be something that you want and you can leave it as disabled, but you're just going to have to run sudo systemctl start Grafana when you want to actually start using Grafana. So I prefer to enable it. So I'll do sudo systemctl enable Grafana server. Now if we do status again, we can see it is now enabled. So it will start automatically on boot. Let's clear that out. Okay, so at this point it is running. I do want to talk about localhost first, actually putting in like an IP address. The server here, the host Bob, is actually, I'm not on that. When I make these videos, I'm on just like my laptop, and I need to SSH into Bob to do all these things. So to access Grafana in my web browser on my laptop, I have to put in the IP address of Bob. So, and you're going to typically, if this is how you're doing it, you're going to want whatever host is hosting it to have a static IP address. That way you're always going to the same IP address to get to Grafana. And you can do that through your router. Typically, if you Google the model number, you'll be able to find the instructions on how to set a static IP for one of your hosts. But I'm just going to grab my IP address here. So I'll do IPA. And then ENO2 is my Ethernet adapter. And I'm just going to grab that. And then let's go over to the browser. And we can do http:// I'll paste in that. And then the port was 9999. So we're now in Grafana, and the first thing that we're going to need to do is log in, and by default it's admin, and then admin for the password. And we're going to be prompted here to create a password. If you don't, if you skip, you're just going to keep getting prompted to do it, so you might as well just set a password, and then we'll just hit submit, and not now. And now we're in Grafana, so everything is working as it should. Again, if you're like in Ubuntu desktop and you installed it on the same host that you're opening up your browser, you would use localhost instead. So you can see it would be localhost and then whatever port you set. By default, again, it's 3000. And at this point, you could start setting up dashboards. You're typically going to want to configure a data source. I use Prometheus as my data source. I have guides on how to do that for Ubuntu. So if I come back here, there's Ubuntu Prometheus as a service. So if you have applications or you want to use something like Node Exporter, which publishes system metrics to Prometheus, then Prometheus connects to Grafana and you can create dashboards with, actually there's pre-built dashboards which are pretty cool that you can use. So that'll be it for this guide. Hopefully it was helpful. If it was, please leave a like and I'll see you in the next one.